Welcome to the Mindfully Gay podcast, where we explore the intersections of mindfulness, identity, and life as gay men. In today's episode, we're discussing the concept of masculinity, how it shows up in our daily lives, and the challenges that come with it. We'll be diving into personal stories about family, coming out, and fitting into the gay community. Thanks for joining us today. Let's get started. Hi everyone, welcome to the Mindfully Gay podcast. We are here and
demure and mindfully gay.
demure and mindful.
Sorry, had to do it. Right.
We had to do it, of course. and speaking of demure and mindful, we're talking about masculinity today.
Nice segue, very nice.
Masculinity. We thought this would be an interesting topic.
That was masculine.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Because I think it comes up quite a bit, even just in regular conversation. It's come up at our retreats, and we've done some workshops around this topic, and about the definition of being a man and manlyhood and masculinity and all that. So we thought we'd bring it to the podcast. So I thought it would be a good conversation to have about it. And as I was thinking about it, this is what came up for me. As I've gotten older, and hopefully I've learned a few things as I've gotten older, I understand that masculinity, femininity, as far as those words, they're social constructs. They're just constructs. It's just the way that we've been socialized. If you're born a certain way, a boy, then you are taught boy things, and if you are born a girl, then you are taught girl things.
And let me just say, I'm sorry to pause, but just real quick. This is such a good illustration of the four agreements. This is very important. Like on the beginning of it, about the lie that we were sold, right?
Yes.
And the way the programming we were given at that early age, and that is exactly this issue that you're talking about. This idea of this social construct.
Yes.
That all of very
domestication. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's this what we've been born into, what we grew up with. And so, as I've gotten older and learned things and aware of things, I see now that this is a social construct, that there's, we label things masculine and feminine, but at my core being, I still live within those constructs.
Yeah.
And even
there's consequence if you don't, it seems,
well,
right?
Well, yes. I mean, going back to our conversation, we talked about coming out, and I shared that, I would see images on TV, as a kid, just seeing images on TV of, the gay character. And it was always the very flamboyant, feminine, guy who was kind of the sidekick or friend or something like that, and just kind of way over the top. And I remember looking at that and just having these interesting and odd ideas about myself. Like, is that me? If that's what I'm going to grow up to be, I don't want to be that.
Same. Anxious. It causes anxiety.
I did not want to be that, and wanted to, and so created a wall, I guess, of hiding that part of myself from everybody, because I didn't want to be seen as this feminine, girly thing.
Right.
That I had to be a boy, I had to be a man, I had to be masculine.
I want to do an exercise.
Mm-hmm.
It just occurred to me as we were sitting here. I know earlier I said I'm not sure how to approach this, and it just kind of came into my mind.
Yeah.
But I want to respond to something you just said about something we're born with.
Mm.
And I think sometimes we use that type of language, but we just gloss over it.
Okay.
And so if we think about the power of how we're socialized, all three of us grew up in English-speaking homes.
Yeah.
And English is our first language. We were socialized through the construct of English, and that's how we think and conceptualize our world.
Yeah.
I know sign language. Do either one of you know any other language?
Sign language, a little bit. French, a little bit.
Okay.
Pig Latin. Real good with Pig
shush.
Latin.
Well, some people can fluently know other languages.
Right.
Yeah.
But here's what I find when I sign. I'm still thinking in English.
Mhm.
And it's like I'm thinking in English. Like I can't sign and talk at the same time because sign and English is two different things.
Mhm.
I have to think it through, then sign it.
You have to translate it.
Right.
Mhm.
And the point is, because I've been so deeply socialized around English, it's my point of reference.
Yeah.
Yes.
Whether it
Yeah.
fits or not,
Mhm.
it's my point
Yeah.
of reference. And so when we talk about these constructs and being born in these constructs,
Mm.
we have to realize that things about how I feel about myself, my self-esteem, my sense of identity, my sense of how I relate to masculinity or femininity, right? That it's a deeply socialized process that to shift it requires a decompression,
Yes.
a deconstruction.
Deconstruction.
I get it because to say that it's a social construct, we can agree.
Yeah.
But it's like, but then now what?
Yeah, but now,
Yeah.
But yes,
you can
you're
say
right.
that,
But you're entirely correct. My whole identity is conceptualized through a language of understanding that now we're saying, I can do the mental work to
Mhm.
stand back and see that it's a social construct, but what? Like that still doesn't release me from it. Like it's still
Right.
It's so ingrained in every decision and every way I look at myself or whatever
Right.
that it's a hard thing to do anything else with.
This last weekend, I went up to a ceremony in Idaho at the reservation there. And myself and this one other person were probably very few Caucasian folks. There was mostly folks from the Shoshone Nations who have this really unique way of caring for each other, and especially caring for their elders. And my friend, who had never been to a ceremony before, just was completely touched and moved because what he was experiencing was a totally different cultural construct.
Mhm.
And I know when I've gone to other countries and places around the world and I see patriarchy and matriarchy and different kind of constructs, I'm always touched with, wow, this is beautiful how this works. I wonder what this would look like in the USA.
Right.
So I want to really focus on when we're talking about masculinity, femininity, and then imagine being born and recognizing, wow, I don't relate to the gender that my body shows up as.
Yeah.
But here's the exercise. And I used to do this with my class. So I'm going to be a facilitator and you two can be the facilitated.
Okay.
But I want us to just think for a moment, how would we respond to the question of a man is or a man is supposed to? Like, what are the things in our mind that qualifies someone as a man?
Yeah, I mean, but I can already see the trap I'm falling
Well,
into with this one.
well,
but yes, no,
what are the
strong.
stereotypical
The man
ideas?
is strong. The man is going to fight. The man is going to protect. The man is going to kill if have to be. The man will gut the animal and clean it and bring it home for the woman to do other things too. Yeah, the breadwinner, the keeping things safe, protection. Yeah, these rescue. You're safe now. These are all men things, I think.
Yeah, the provider. Men don't share their emotions. They're the leaders. They are the hierarchy. They're powerful.
They're president. They're always president.
Men
don't cry. Men don't share their feelings.
Have to be strong.
Right.
Okay, so
men don't say they're scared. Don't express fear. They don't. Their anxieties. They don't talk about their emotion. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Okay, so how would we, if we were saying woman, a woman is or a woman's supposed to, what is that supposed to look like?
Right.
How would we answer those questions?
I'd probably start with women are caring, gentle,
raise the kids,
soft. Yeah, the caregiver,
nurturing,
the nurturers.
They're so emotional.
They're emotional, but they can be understanding of emotions.
Mm-hmm.
That's who you talk to about your emotions.
Who takes care of the children?
Yeah, motherly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, puts their needs last for everyone else, kids. Yeah, it's strange as we do this. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to derail the exercise, but as we do this, I'm realizing it's the females that I'm so jazzed about the most that have, I guess, seemingly masculine trait. I mean, I don't know. Our potential next female president is looking pretty badass. That speech last night was very, as someone said, muscular. It was a very strong speech. She was showing her teeth sometimes. I love that when women take on traits that I guess we just discussed are masculine for the sake of this exercise. So I'm sorry, keep going with the exercise.
Well, let me ask you this. If you look at the traits, you're a psychologist. If you were to look, if a client came in and demonstrated all of those traits of being a man, how would you diagnose them? Narcissistic?
No, I'm saying narcissistic, a little bipolar. I don't know.
Antisocial.
There you go. Antisocial. Yes. Oh my gosh.
Isn't it interesting? We have a prison out here. We used to call it the Point of the Mountain. I used to work there. We had 8 to 10 buildings at that time that were solely committed to male inmates.
Yes.
And we had one building committed to females.
Right.
So we can already see how these constructs have kind of impacted. Like it doesn't work. And if I were looking at an individual that had all those, I'd be thinking, wow, this person's like really fucked up, right? It's interesting that you use Kamala as an example, right? Because to somehow verify or substantiate her as a reasonable candidate, we project a masculine quality. What if she showed up at that podium and was this nurturing, powerful woman who expressed a tear and gave motherly type advice? How would we look at her?
We would have attacked her kindness as weakness. It would have
How
been,
can she be a leader?
Fox News would have just ripped her to shreds. Yeah, exactly.
Now take what happened when the vice president, the future vice president, spoke. He had a 17-year-old son who apparently has some neurodivergent kind of dynamics. But this kid was obviously caught up in the energy of what was happening, was very emotional.
Beautiful.
And what has happened on Twitter and social media in reference to that young man?
I mean, what did Ann Coulter do specifically? That bitch, that disgusting bitch, the way she ripped on him.
No. But, right, without the information implied, just knowing that he's a male expressing emotion, it was degraded. So then bring that into our coming out processes, right? Our sense of how we exist in the world. What happens to a male who does not live up to the criteria that we listed as a man? What do they get called?
Wuss.
Failure. Yeah, you're gay.
Yeah. Right. Entirely.
Fag.
Gay.
Sissy.
Yeah.
Wuss. We feminize it.
Yeah.
Right? And isn't it interesting that we use femininity as a critical tool of judgment, which might suggest, how do we feel about femininity?
Yeah, exactly.
And how our culture privileges things like logic and reason as more legitimate, if you will, than nurturing and emotional, loving qualities.
Yeah. I mean, that's why as a kid, I saw that, seeing these feminine, expressive men on television and thinking, oh no, I can't be that.
Yeah, I can't learn this.
I'll look down upon. I'll be ostracized.
My whole life will be a problem.
Yes.
Right. That's exactly what I thought.
We've weaponized, we've demonized, the characteristics of feminine or femininity or being a woman or a girl. And yeah, and what does that do to a gay kid, a gay boy?
Or even someone who's identifying as transgender.
Right.
Because
Oof.
who are the number one, which population is most likely to end up murdered is transgender women of color.
Always.
And I think part of that is, how is it that a male-bodied person would give up that privilege and embody femininity?
Oh.
Right, because they want all
Our
that.
trans men aren't getting the same attention as
Trans women.
Right.
No. Oh.
I know we're shaking our heads, and it's not because I can't fathom the having a feeling inside so strong that you know what you're dealing with physically is not what you really are, and just the way that people are ostracized. I mean, just everything we're just talking about now, everything we just talked about, femininity and identifying as such, and how problematic that is, and then still knowing that you have to pursue this and you have to change and you have to transition. And I can't imagine. It just hurts me because I just feel like that's just such a painful path. And
for those who are dealing with that, even, trans, bi, gay, lesbian, there's a sense of courage and bravery, power and strength that is allowing them to say, I am going to live my truth.
Yeah.
I am going to live my truth, no matter the consequences. And that's something
that's incredibly inspiring and respectful, right? I mean, I don't know. I think if that had happened to me, I would be disowned from my family. But they know that, and they're still making the decision because they have to live their true selves.
So I guess you brought up the 4 agreements, and one of the guiding principles of that book is about living authentic lives. And I know for me, and maybe you guys can relate to this, the closet for me, right? I left high school where sports for me was track and field and karate. Very individualistic. I never participated in team sports because I was afraid I wouldn't measure up as a guy. Then I went into the military and tried to look as butch as I could. But there was always this fear that if I somehow slipped in my masculine persona, that I would get found out. Then I went on my Mormon mission. Right? Was in the priesthood. Like all these things that were about verifying and validating a sense of masculinity. Right. And so I would engage in things like working out and working hard and compensating. I felt like there was a big piece of my life where I was compensating, but it was always this fear of not projecting man enough.
Getting caught.
Yeah. And even now, I think I'm a pretty actualized person in many ways. Like I work really hard on myself. But I tell you what, if I were sitting here and starting to get emotion, my domestication would say, shut it down.
Reel it in. Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm wondering, part of this question is, how does these constructs, how does this domesticated view of masculinity, like how has it impacted how we exist today as gay men? And if we were being authentic, if we could let down those masks, like my goal before I die is to be free in my expression of emotion, to allow myself permission to fully express, and to not ever feel like I have to censor it.
Yeah.
So I kind of wonder, how would you guys relate to that question?
I'm realizing something that I do with my father. Here we go. Okay. I'm realizing something I do though with my dad. when I get upset, and there have been times, so this very horrible long story, we'll make it very short. My cousin Shane, who I invoked brought into the circle, his spirit rather, at last lodge, my age, my cousin, he killed himself. He went out to the desert and put a garden hose in his car and went that way. And I went to that funeral, and it was in a Mormon church, and my cousin, who is his oldest brother, who was facilitating the whole thing, did this program that had pictures of Shane with girls on it, and there was no mention of the partner and the boyfriends that he had or anything like that. And I really lost it, and I ripped my face off, and I ripped into the cousin with there was tons of people there, and everyone heard, and I left. And what ended up happening is I go out to the car, and I'm there out in the parking lot while my entire family is inside eating up this lie. And it just incensed me. I was so angry that I called my father, and for 2 hours solid, I just proceeded to yell. I was so angry. I was screaming. I was like, fucking this and that. And just, I was expressing emotion, but I was doing it in such a hyper aggressive way that I felt like I wouldn't be seen as weak by my father, because I just needed him to know how fucking angry I was that this was happening, that I felt like my whole life it had been happening to me, that he was responsible for it, that there's still issues we haven't resolved. And I was kind of getting at those with my anger. I was trying to show him how angry I was through this emotional burst of just aggressive and hyper, I guess, masculine presentation of my emotions. Mm-hmm. And it's weird. I don't get emotional in a more gentle or maybe more feminine way with my father. I don't. And now they're afraid. Joel Hole told me that they're afraid now of me blowing up. Hmm. And so I don't know. What I'm trying to answer is, what has it done? I don't know. And particularly with my father, clearly we got to work through some things. When it comes to expressing emotion with him, I guess I feel like I can only do it if I'm yelling and then I'm really angry and showing teeth, mm-hmm. which is weird. But so I think in some ways that. But on the flip side, I don't know. I cried a lot in this podcast. I cried a lot in this house, mm-hmm. and I don't feel bad about doing it. I think that it's practice. I think that it is something that we need to practice more of. That is one of the amazing things about retreat, is that it is that opportunity to do that, to be with other dudes or other people in our community otherwise, and have emotional exchange that you don't have to be guarded about. You don't have to be worried about being figured out. You don't have to show your teeth because your dad's listening or whatever. And, so I don't know. I guess what the constructs have done for me is, I guess it definitely for the longest time, I never expressed emotion. I guess it built up. And so maybe when it did, I was yelling and weird or whatever. But at the same time, what we have done, what this podcast is doing for me, or what the retreat work that we're doing, or the just meeting community and sharing emotion has helped me, maybe understand how to not observe those constructs. So not be, held by those constructs, mm-hmm. like I used to be. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did I answer anything all right? Just that, or did I kind of go off in weird places?
Well, I'll just make an observation though. I think when we talk about what does it mean to be a man, what does it mean to be a woman, men have a much more restrictive palette of emotional expression available to them than women. Yeah. Right. And so we're alive and have a good time and we can be mad. Mm-hmm. Right. Women get to be caring and nurturing and loving and sensitive, and right. If we access those things. And so I think, when you say I express no emotion, you were expressing the one emotion that you have access to.
And was socially appropriate.
Yeah. And it asserts a particular, right? Cole says everyone's anxious, right? About whether or not how you'll be in the future. And I think I meet with a lot of gay men who have a lot of anger, either expressed or unexpressed. Sometimes they internalize it on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that in addiction. We see that in suicide. We see that in depression. I think sometimes depression is anger turned inward.
Exactly.
Agreed.
I think the other piece too is when we look at anger, we can also identify that anger is a legitimate feeling, but it's often motivated by something else.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And usually that something else can be attached to some layer of hurt,
Yes.
right? A perceived failure, an injustice,
A loss.
right? But what men do is instead of accessing the hurt,
Mm-hmm.
we adapt it and it becomes anger, and then it becomes anger that's lashed out.
That's it.
Hence the 10 buildings in prison
Mm-hmm.
versus the one for women.
No
Right.
kidding.
That's
Wow.
it. That's it. Yeah.
Where do you go with this?
Well, I can certainly relate to the feeling and idea of not being found out. That fear of being found out. If I act outside of the construct, then I'm going to be found out. And then I guess my head goes to the worst case possible. You'll be ostracized, you'll be beaten up, you'll be kicked out, no one will love you, no one will like you, all that stuff. Because I'm gay or because I act a certain way. And so what it's done to me, it makes me very hyper aware of all that in just about every situation. It's, just hyper vigilant about, can I be me? Nope, probably not. Let me put on the man mask. Let me turn on the deep voice. Let me, get the shoulders up, all that, persona just to get by, to not be found out, to not be seen, just to get through those situations. And yes, like I started out saying, I understand the constructs, but I'm still at the core very much a product of it, and will slip right into it. I think I have the same desire as you. I want to be able to just not care.
Right,
about
just
it.
what you just explained is exhausting.
It's
You have to do
is.
before you say anything. Before you do
Mhm.
anything, you got to be. You got to. The armor comes on and everything,
Totally.
and you're breathing differently. But yeah, and it's exhausting. And
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I'm with you. Yeah.
Yes. And it's the same. I'll just throw it out there. It's the same to being a black person too. Just being very mindful and kids like, what am I wearing today? Can I wear this?
Right.
I like hoodies.
No, don't do it.
Right? I mean, and some folks don't have to think about that. I'm wearing my hoodie. I've got to think about that going out in public.
It's a statement. Right.
And so yeah, it's exhausting to have to sit and almost edit or turn on the
Pre-edit before it happens.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, exactly.
all the things
Yeah.
where it would be easier just to not have to worry about it. And what's lovely is that when I'm in circumstances like a gay men's retreat,
Yeah.
or even just a gay friendly space, I like going down to Palm Springs. I go to the nudist resorts. That's my jam.
For sure.
I can be myself.
Yep.
Don't have to worry about what to wear.
I don't have to worry about what I'm wearing.
To pack for, right?
And if I do, it's just this gorgeous sarong that I just tie around my waist really low.
Do I need to check this?
But wait, I have to make an observation. I'm sorry, because I can already tell by the shift in energy,
Mhm.
right? When you're in a space like that,
Mhm.
and all that pre-editing horseshit is suspended,
Yeah.
you are open to experience,
Mhm.
right? It's
Mhm.
so much more tangible, so much more enjoyable, even if it's simpler. It's much simpler, and you are not preventing the gifts of the day or the experience to come to you.
Mm.
Do you know what? I have a very different experience in
Mm.
gay spaces.
Mm.
Like, I don't tend to get really terribly worked up about how I present. But if I'm going to like gay pride, or if I'm going to maybe the club or a gay event, I meticulously pay attention to what I'm wearing. I worry about it. It stresses me out. And I'm not sure what that's about. Like, I get the whole, like, how do I feel in gay spaces versus straight spaces, I think my repertoire is I know how to do the straight look.
Right.
I'm not sure what's allowed or what I can give myself permission to do
Mm-hmm.
in the gay spaces.
Yeah, and that's the dilemma. And let me put a caveat on what I said. It's not just any gay space. It's spaces where I know people.
Safe.
There's
Yeah.
a trust.
Yeah.
There's, there's
Like what we do here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like this right here, I
Yeah.
trust, and so I can just, I can let my,
Yeah, okay.
I can let my hair down,
Yeah.
and but I can relate to that, Jerry. Going to like a club or something, or even gay pride. It's
pressure.
It's pressure.
Yeah.
There's pressure around that. It's like, am I going to be the right gay person?
Yeah.
No shit.
And that's a whole different,
it's a whole different construct
of the.
Well, so, we talked about, let's have this conversation about masculinity, but now it feels like the conversation around masculinity, now that we're talking about, well, I'm not even sure how to show up in gay spaces. What happens when we're just authentic across the board?
Yeah.
Right? If we just gave ourselves permission to let it flow out of us in whatever way it is meant to be.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure I know what that would look like for me.
I know what it feels like, because I think that I've had, with porn work, I definitely in the beginning, this speaks back to kind of what we were talking about earlier. I don't know if it was recorded, but just not being so calculating with how I present, because I was so concerned with that. And so in the beginning with porn, I had my ideas about what my persona was supposed to be like. He had his ideas. And so we were kind of always, I don't know, being like that.
Yeah.
And I think what I've learned over time is that I don't need to do that. In fact, people, the fans that we have and the response that we get, people like it when we are more of what you're talking about, where it's less about trying to stay true to a stereotype of this, or the varietal of gay, or whatever we're talking about, but just letting words happen, conversations happen, just being real. Again, those are the videos of us, the clips of us. It's often not the sex clips. It's just the conversations and our back and forth and being real with each other. And it's in moments like that I know that I'm not being, I don't need to be the lumberjack or whatever. I'm not trying to do that. And so I felt what it's like to put that out there, to just be less guarded and calculating about every syllable as it's coming out, and just letting myself be myself. I think that's what it feels like. It's just, I don't know, for me, I guess I have this unique opportunity because I have, like, kind of like you're saying, going to a gay event, am I the right type of gay? I kind of have this micro, on a micro level, maybe I have this opportunity because I have this audience that when I do practice what I feel is being more authentic myself, it's embraced. So I think it feels good. I don't know, I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
I'm going to go here. We can always shift if we need to. But I was actually thinking about porn as we were having this conversation. How it's interesting when I think about the language that we use to describe ourselves as gay men. I'm straight acting. I'm butch. I'm masculine acting. Like, we attach ourselves to a nomenclature that is we're using words that we make assumptions project a particular idea.
Yeah.
And if I look at some OnlyFans stuff or just some porn stuff out there, it's interesting how some of those hyper masculine ideas get really exaggerated. And even if I think about the other end of the continuum, right? Femme acting, man pussy, right? Like, it's interesting how we're using language. And to me, when I look at it, I think, wow, this just feels so derogatory. Like, why can't I just enjoy being a bottom and not trying to treat it as, right? Who's the dominant? Who's the submissive? Right? Some bottoms can be incredibly aggressive. Thank you.
There's aggressive bottoms out there.
But I guess what are the images that we're relating to? Are they educating us, enlightening us? Are we able to distinguish fantasy from reality? Do we try to live up to particular ideas? I I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing it out there because I think somewhere in this mix, even how some might act towards others based on sexual positions, how much of that is healthy, unhealthy, fantasy versus reality? I don't know. I'm just kind of riffing.
No. I mean, when it's consensual, that's one thing, right? When it's role playing and it's consensual, I think the derogatoriness towards the bottom or whatever. I cannot even touch race play. It's just not something I'm ever going to do. We definitely have people come at us wanting to do that. And it's just, that's so. But when I'm getting at when it's consensual, I guess that's one thing. But I hear what you're saying. There's shame, right, with being a bottom. It's like shameful. And, if you're in the straight world talking about gay sex, as long as you're not the one taking it in the ass, then we're going to be okay with you, that type of bullshit.
Right, yeah,
so I mean, I think when it's consensual and people want to be, however, that's all good. And I don't think there's any issue with that type of stuff. But when it's, I don't know, it definitely is again, I guess it is another social construct that's there. But again, it's just like, okay, now what? I mean, yes, that's true. It is. But then I don't know how to get away from it. I think talking about it is enlightening. And I think it might help people. It might empower people to feel better about the roles that they're trying out or whatever, and have less shame about things.
Yes.
But it's still a program that we've been given that we're all running. It's in our own computers, and we're all coming together and we're talking this language together. And I don't know. I think this is still related. It is related. I still am hopeful though, like what you were about to say, like the masculine stereotype on OnlyFans, let's say. Because I'm doing some research. Maybe I do some research every now and then. Maybe I do. But
your credit card's maxed out.
Exactly. Don't even have credit cards anymore. No. But I do find it interesting the way in which the stereotype is played with. Is change the nail polish, the lacy pants. I don't know. To me, it's like, okay, all right, I'm down. I'm down with you as the individual taking on the stereotype and messing with it a bit. Like that's cool. I don't know. I like that. I think I don't know. I think that sometimes. Sorry. I think that sometimes I am, especially in a gym setting, in a very masculine mode. Because what I've learned is that's how I bag straight dudes. Like, that's just how I get to have sex with straight dudes. I'm sorry, it's true. But at the same time, there are some straight dudes that definitely respond better to a feminine man. And I've seen it. I know that it's happened. I've seen them pass me by. Like, I've been rejected for a straight dude because I was too, I guess, straight or acting, and the little queen ends up taking him home, I've seen things like that have happened. And I guess that what I'm trying to get at is that, well, we're talking about these stereotypes, and it's like, okay, so we all agree it's a program, we all got it, we're all running it, so now what? I do think at the same time, at least I've witnessed, I'm seeing people try to change it, and they're understanding the stereotypes, and maybe they're not as rigid with them. I don't know if that helps.
Something you said, Nick, that kind of caught my attention. As people are kind of exploring, kind of running down the list of these stereotypes, or just different ways of being, and kind of in the gay world, they just kind of put things on for size and just try them on. But they're kind of on their own. That's the image I have. And so what I imagine and hope for is that person, discovering this podcast or coming to our social events or coming to our retreat, so they can have a conversation about these things. Like, you know what? I was wondering about this versus that. And there can be a discussion about it.
Love it.
And I bring that up because some of the people men that I work with in therapy are kind of late bloomers. They're coming out of the closet late in life, and so they're really trying to discover who they are now, finding their identity. Who am I? And so they are kind of going down those lists,
Sure.
and like, where do I fit, right? And
Isn't that interesting? Fitting seems so
Yeah.
right.
Which box do I go
incongruent
in?
Which
with
box do I
authentic.
go in? Well, yeah, which one?
It does. It's the opposite of authentic.
Yeah.
Right.
And what
Yeah.
I try to do, and I hope I'm doing, is listening to those questions and what they're feeling and thinking about. I try to bring it back to, well, what makes you happy?
Yeah.
What makes you?
right.
What
Yeah.
feels good?
Yeah.
What feels good to you? And rather than trying to label and slap a label on them or put them in a box, because they come to me, what do you think I am? Am I gay?
You're supposed to Harry
You-
Potter hat. The head, right?
You are a butch otter.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Exactly.
here it is, right
Who's
here.
versatile.
But in 3 years from now, get ready. 'Cause right. Right.
So hopefully giving them some space and some languaging around, well, does that feel good?
Yeah.
Does that make you happy? Or how do you feel when you do that?
Yeah.
Or when you behave like that?
Mhm.
Or perform that way? And it makes, I hope it's making a difference in, like, oh, I don't have to slap on a label.
Yeah.
I can just be my authentic self.
Mm.
And I often think those like top and bottom are interesting labels, right? But I often think when someone says I'm a top or I'm a bottom, I'm thinking, you're missing half the fun. but I often think people identify with those labels out of a sense of belonging and not always about
What they really want.
Yeah. Well, there's a both and, there's truth to that. I think it's not like, I don't think we need to get rid of those labels and constructs, because it is helpful, especially for,
It is.
for
It's a map,
maybe
right?
it's a map,
Yeah.
even for the late bloomer, but even for the early bloomer. Because I know someone whose son came out, late teens and just kind of figuring things out. And so he kind of put some labels on himself to kind of fit in a kind of group of friends that he has. And his mom was saying, well, you don't have to put on those labels, but it was important to him.
Yeah.
Because he says, it's important to me to have that label, because then I can show up as that person for my colleagues, for my friends, for my allies. If I say that I'm this and my friend is also that, I can stand up for them.
Yeah.
And they'll stand up for me.
Mm.
It's like, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
They've got each other's backs. So I think there is something to say about, I'm femme, or I'm bi, or I'm this, or I'm that, that can be helpful to another
Makes
person.
sense.
Yeah. I want to throw one thing out before we get to the end of the podcast here. And it's when we were talking about doing this topic, I remembered this. When I first came out of the closet and started going to the clubs, because that's where we went back in the 80s and 90s.
Right, that's how we met people.
I would be terrified of the drag queens.
Mm.
A drag queen would approach me or come near me. I enjoyed the shows. It was always kind of like, But if someone who was in drag would approach me or get near to me, I would have to physically move.
Mm.
And at some point I remember thinking, what is that about?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was like, why am I having such a reaction?
Mm-hmm.
And I think in those days, it was definitely, I had left a marriage. I'm not interested. There's, in the Kinsey scale, there was no middle ground for me. I like men. Mm-hmm. And I think there was a part of me that was afraid of being associated with someone who was more feminine-like. Yeah. And once I kind of grappled with that, I actually kind of made it an objective of mine to get to know some drag queens, to try to understand their world. I don't enjoy BDMS and that world, but I have spent time talking to people who are very much immersed in that world.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued by it.
Mm-hmm.
I find it very curious, and I want to understand it.
Yeah.
That's how I approached it with drag queens. I want to just understand, like, what is your relationship with this craft, this art, this presentation? And I'm in a really different place around that because I allowed myself to try to put myself in their stilettos. But I don't know. Do any of you guys have had that kind of experience?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think at first, same, like hesitant to cozy up to drag queens, just because I didn't, I was afraid of the association. I was afraid of, this person that's so out loud living. I just wasn't there yet, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But very same. I mean, then I started meeting some. Then I saw Varla Jean Merman. I mean, I've seen some crazy queens that are capable of amazing shit. And so from a performance art perspective, the respect comes. And then, of course, the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. Yes. I mean, these are people that, Cole and I have had many interactions with at nightclubs. I mean, they're always there. They're often booked for the same things we were doing, appearances and stuff like that. And so, they're wonderful people that are getting things done in the community, right? And so they're different, I guess, kind of like you. I had to cultivate a better understanding of what a drag queen was with myself, so that I could not keep being afraid of them. Yes, I guess is what it is.
Yeah. I think for me, it's been, and then honestly, it kind of continues today. Some, very effeminate men, I get a little uncomfortable. I get uncomfortable because there's still that piece. Like, I don't want to be associated with that. I want to be seen as that.
I also feel too sometimes, I'm sorry if I may, what also sets is like, oh my God, you're going to get your ass kicked if you keep acting like this. Like, we're in Utah.
Yeah, be careful.
This is an acting place. This isn't safe for you. That does also spark up too. The more out there and flamboyant, I'm like, oh God, I can't be standing close to this person because you're going to get us killed. Sorry, keep going, but go.
Yeah. I mean, there's that piece too, just you're going to get hurt because it's really a projection. It's like, well, I'm going to get hurt because if I act like that, surely I get hurt. I'm flat.
Right. I used to teach this class at the university. It was on diversity issues, and I gave the students an assignment to immerse themselves in a cultural experience outside of something that they're used to. So if I had Mormon students, they might go and spend time in a Catholic monastery or something. And I had these two guys who were kind of tall, slender, but jockish kind of guys who decided to spend an entire day in drag.
Wow.
And for whatever reason, these two guys decided to go to a park downtown. And they had to end their experiment because they were fearful for their lives. And so their whole presentation was about the persistent engagement. And they tried to do it for like this whole weekend, but they said they stopped early because there were particular times where they were seriously questioning their safety.
Yeah.
And I think I want to point this out in case the listener's not hearing it. None of us are saying the problem is drag queens or problems are feminine men. The problem is our constructs are so tightly woven that we have to exercise that consciousness of how we are in relationship to those who may have a little bit more liberty to be a little bit more feminine in how they present. You guys don't know this, but I've been negotiating with a kind of a celebrity drag queen who I'm hoping will come and join us on the podcast. And she's going to give a listen to some of our episodes, and invited her to come and
That'd be great.
talk to us.
Yeah. I'm glad you made that point, because it's more about, it's about me. I've got to put the mirror in front of my face in regards to, why am I uncomfortable? It's not their problem.
It's me thinking, if I were dressed like you right now, I would be afraid for my... Yeah.
It's that. It's like, I got to look this way. I got to, turn it around and look at me, what's happening with me. And what, another thing, I think, just getting a little older, a little bit more mature, and hopefully a little bit more open-minded, when now I see folks, now because we're seeing so much more as far as, in social media, television, gender bending, and the whole gamut, part of me is now jealous of a lot of folks. Like, wow, how are you able to just be yourself?
No, you just said it with that you just said, the way you said it with the drag queens, and the from my perspective, I wonder, like, how do you have that level of personal liberty or freedom? Like, that's the thing that I'm always like, how, and I think, wow, they're just not as latched onto the program that I am. I guess that's what it is. But it does, it's a wonder. I'm like, wow, to be that, I guess, strong, to be that proud and secure, to be able to do that. I'm still worried for your personal safety.
Yeah. There, it's interesting. This morning at the gym, there's these two young gay guys, cute, handsome young men, and they frequently hold hands together. And it's interesting. I see them holding hands, and there's a part of me that says, finally.
Right.
But then I find myself scanning the room, wondering, does anyone else
Is
know
anyone
this?
watching?
Seeing this? Yeah.
Same thing.
And,
they're doing it together at the same time. Oh my God, you're getting in trouble. You're gonna get hurt.
There's another young person. I haven't seen him in a while, but tall, slender, beautiful young person. I'm going to say he, they. Very graceful. Does a lot of yoga stuff, and kind of has a feminine presentation, but not too overtly so. But has very manicured red fingernails. And I actually approached him at the gym, and I said, you are a very graceful person. I hope you're pursuing yoga as a profession, because you're very graceful at what you do. And I just want you to know, I see you and I appreciate you. And he was very touched, by that. He was just like, well, thank you. And interesting. Now when I see him, we always have a little banter and talk.
And think about what you did for him, in that you step out for the day with your red fingernails and your grace, and you're worried about how people will perceive it, maybe in the back of his mind. Maybe he has to keep talking to himself to get it to shut up or whatever. So he just stay focused on trying to be something authentic. And then you have someone that comes forward and says, I see you. Ugh, fuck. Why you make me cry, Jerry?
Because I'm pinching you.
That's huge.
So I just want to publicly say that, Nick, when we work out together, you now have permission to wear the pink leg warmers and the Olivia Newton matching headband.
Now these folks now are becoming, I say I'm jealous, and I wonder, like, what's that liberation and freedom that they're living with that allows them to do that? Now they're my heroes. Now I'm inspired by these folks, because it does something. I think the jealousy has shifted to admiration, and I want some of that.
Yeah.
And how can I do that? And I just heard actually another client of mine who used to live in Salt Lake and has now moved to Southern California, and like, what a cultural contrast, right? And just going to parts of LA, and he's seeing these people just with different hairstyles and vibrant colored clothes and handmade things, and just very free and liberating and bright and beautiful. Some things that we really just don't see a lot of here in Salt Lake. And he said, I just felt so alive. I'm like, well, so what is this? He said, that's me.
Yeah, it
that's
encourages.
Me.
Yeah.
Because he's another person who's just trying to find his identity. Like, who am I?
Yeah.
And he said, that's me. I said, well, stay in that vibe. Go, keep put yourself in that circle. If you're getting something out of that and it's motivating you and you're starting to inspire you and you're starting to see who you really are, then go with it.
Yeah.
We're all three saying it because we're three of us with these programs that were given to us at birth, that it's rigid, it's in us, and it's hard to change it. It's hard to change the program. But we've all three have brought up examples of we've witnessed in others them doing it, them changing the program. And that gives us, just like we're saying, we're all in wonderment of these queens that can be like this and do that. And it just seems like such a conflict with the program I'm running inside, but it's an example of someone that they too, inevitably had to be given the program. I mean, you can safely pretty assume they were probably given the same thing, but we are now in a time when that people are playing with the program, right? They're starting to change it. They're starting to modify, and individuals like your client are seeing it, and it inspires them to do the same. Yeah. And so, the question of masculine and feminine and the rigidity with the two and the shame and the whatever, it's, as hard as it is to do this for yourself and try to understand who you are authentically, I think what I'm hearing being said is that it's not something you do on your own. It's something you have to do in community. It's something you have to do. It's a shared process. Yeah. And especially because we've all come from a time when it was just so deeply controversial to be gay for thousands of years even. We've always been here, but it's just, once religions, I mean, we could, anyway, once all that crap started happening, it became so controversial to be ourselves that we had to adhere to programs to be safe. And, maybe now we're finally in a time, for God's sakes, we could potentially finally have a female president, a black female president even, finally there's these shifts happening. And it opens up for younger generations, maybe to safely now experiment with changing the program. And we as the older generations are seeing it, and it's inspiring.
I'm sitting here listening to this, and I'm thinking this really interesting continuum. Our conversation has kind of gone from masculine to feminine, if you will, using those traditional concepts. And interesting how we have both identified at both ends of the continuum, right? And maybe our accessibility of expressing ourselves, maybe our next podcast, we're all in drag, I don't know, but we'll have to do some serious hair removal over here.
You just glitter it up, girl.
I'm going all natural if that's what we're doing. I'm one of those gals.
But my point is, I've come to appreciate this new, it's not a new concept, but I think it's a more accepted concept of fluidity. Yeah. And I said earlier, I just want to have the freedom to kind of emotionally express myself. And I think if I were to revamp that desire, I think it would be to feel more comfortable in the fluidity of my existence, to allow the expression to be authentic, and that it can swing from one end to the next, and I'm still Jerry.
Exactly. Yeah. Because it could be from day to day. It could be from hour to hour. Yeah. As far as where you kind of float on that continuum, right? And just ride it. You flow with it. Don't fight. I keep this image I keep having is, here's this construct, like this box in front of us, and someone's got a jackhammer or something, and just like smashing this construct. Like, I'm not doing this anymore. Yeah. I'm done with that. Which also now reminds me of, and I don't know when this particular episode is being aired, but we are hosting an event on October 12th. Our coming out celebration. Coming out day is the 11th, correct?
It's the 11th. We chose the 12th because it's on a weekend. And in one of our podcasts, we were brainstorming about, wouldn't it be nice if we had ritual, ceremony, something that marked the initiation of coming out and stepping into it. And so what we came up with was having a heart circle and a gathering of people who wanted to celebrate ritualistically National Coming Out Day, and that we would focus on our coming out stories, kind of the struggles and the blessings. And then we would then move into the sweat lodge. And then after Sweat Lodge, we would have a celebration feast.
Yeah, celebration. And I think it just captures what we're talking about. We're just celebrating who we are, just where you are, who you are, and what you are at that moment.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think so. October 12th, put it on your calendar. Look us up on the website, mindfullygay.com. You'll see that event and other events.
And it's a donation based. So come. If you can't pay, that's fine. If you want to make a donation, there'll be a jar on the table. But we just really want guys and folks to show up and to celebrate that piece. We have your meditation classes next the week before that.
Yeah, meditation class, just all these things. And, and Nick was alluded to it too. Just this is practice.
Yeah.
This is practice of trying something new, stepping into, a part of yourself, or you're exploring or having questions about parts of yourself. Here's where you can get to practice it.
It is. If you're struggling with identity, come to these events, because other people are struggling with identity too.
That's the thing.
And it's not just about coming together and struggling, because there's also people that have that maybe have a clearer perspective on identity, and you get to be inspired by that. And and those are the types it is. It's an environment to practice all of that without any pressure of failure, without any you're not going to be put in a corner. We put some people in a corner, I guess, but that's different. But it's a very non-anxiety zone, and it is just a place to practice and to better understand yourself through understanding other people better.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you know what I'm going to say? I talk to people on the apps. I talk to people on social media, and everyone's bitching and complaining about how much they hate the apps, how much they hate social media. Well, get off your asses and show up.
Stop posting about it.
Yeah, we can't make this any easier.
It's true.
So you are invited to come join us.
Cecilia, that comes out.
We would gladly open the door wide for you. We would love to have you. And if you're not in the area, certainly dialogue with us through email or text, through the DMs and all of that. We want to hear your story. We want to hear your conversations. And even if you are far away and have a story to tell and want to be on the podcast, we can certainly hook it up with all the technology to have you as a guest on the podcast, so that you can share your experience, because it is going to be so valuable.
It is.
So valuable to those who are listening to these stories.
Yeah.
Any last things?
I think we're good.
I think that's it. So I think that's a wrap. So thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Mindfully Gay podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Mindfully Gay podcast. We hope our discussion on masculinity has given you something to reflect on in your own life.
As always, we love hearing from you. Share your stories about masculinity or coming out on our Instagram channel at mindfully_gay.
And be sure to visit our website, mindfullygay.com, for more info on our upcoming free social events. We're so grateful for your support.
Until next time, keep showing up as your authentic self.